How do you stay updated on what's important to you?
I guess I try and watch whatever news I can on TV and try and read from different sources on the web.
From a news perspective, I guess I tend to get my news via the internet, so I will look principally at the BBC website.
Generally read headlines on BBC News or Twitter. Actually is the newest thing I think that has helped me stay updated on what's happening constantly and updates on a certain event.
NPR, PBS, NECN, stuff like that.
I like to say like New York Times, all that stuff, but that's not really even true. You know, you download the app and then you realize that, I still don't have a subscription, so I don't really feel like paying for my news. I can get it pretty much anywhere.
If I'm looking for information about something, the internet's where I get stuff. If I'm looking for opinions, I look elsewhere.
Usually online. I tend to check out CNN.com. I also read the Metro. And sometimes I'll go to Fark.com just to see the weird and crazy news, and I'll sort of click on things off of that. So I spend a lot of my time online.
We are reading and watching online.
Yes, me too. The same.
Right. How do I define news? Information, really, very basic.
Wow, that's a good question.
News, I mean, I don't feel like I define it. I feel like news is something that's, we're used to, like, we have an idea of it as like, we see it on TV, you know, the news, you know, Anchorman.
News, I think it's events that are recent and affect the world.
They tell us what's happening in the world, and we take their word on it. And I feel like a lot of the news is really just so false, and not even new, because a lot of news is whatever is interesting. You know, look at CNN now, like they're doing stories on Taylor Swift when things we need to know about are happening on the other side of the world. And I don't know.
News is recent events that occur in the worldwide.
Something that is brand new, not history. Not history yet.
I can't say much because I feel like I don't watch enough news to really, you know, make a big, you know, stance on that. But
the imparting of new information to people, it's kind of in the word news, something that's new.
It's weird because I feel like not a lot of people watch enough news, and they watch like one episode of something or one news report, and they're good for the week.
And I go on. I think that's what newspapers have failed to realise, that they're not in control of anymore.
News is stuff that's happening new.
How would I define the term news? Anything relevant happening today?
What kind of news matters to you?
Political. I usually don't like sensationalist kind of celebrity news. I don't even want to call that news, though I define it as information. But I usually want to stay in touch with political, sports, generally speaking, though that can also count as socio-political. So,
to me personally, I'm interested in world news. I think all news is important. You know, things that happen on a local scale, be it bad things or breakthroughs in technology or changes in laws. You know, whatever.
What matters to me in the news? Maybe the way people are portrayed. Different races of people, different creeds, you know, gender, sex, everything.
I think global news is important because it's important to look at things from a worldwide perspective as opposed to just being focused on local things. Yeah.
The topics that matter, you can say everything social, but it's too vague.
Politics, The environment.
Sport.
Sport.
And the arts.
The arts. Yeah, those are probably the main things.
International news. Local. Science.
Honestly, I am totally fixated on the weird Montreal killer and the face eater and stuff like that. I tend to like a little bit of the sensationalist stuff.
Political news, I think. That's for me.
You know, I'll read the celebrity things of, you know, what the people on Jersey Shore are doing, who's pregnant, whatever, but I kind of enjoy, unfortunately, some of the gruesome stuff that's on there.
I like politics, things around the local area, Boston, Cambridge. That's pretty important, I guess.
It's difficult because I feel like nothing, I don't, like, it's, you watch the news and you say, oh, you know what, that sucks a lot over there. And it's not personal, it's not relevant to you. It's so relevant on the basis of the conversation of like what's human rights and what's what's universal, like how the universal human experience, like, you know, like if this was me, like what would I be doing about it? But it's not me, and they don't make it seem like you. They make it seem like another people some far away, and I think that breeds a lot of apathy, especially in Americans, and it's tough, you know, because you want to care more than you do.
Where do you find your news?
Nowadays, usually the internet and newspapers, whatever newspapers I can find.
Online, mostly. I Google a lot of my news, and usually I find it on the Huffington Post.
Online, I think BBC, Euronews from Europe, CNN, of course, and another online.
What outlets? Where do you find your news? Like, what kind of medium?
Television, newspaper, magazine.
Yeah, online. The websites that my colleague just listed. I've already answered this question. Yeah.
Cool.
But this is, I think, is a really big thing. So I find my news on the internet. I do not use newspapers anymore to find news. I don't read the newspapers to find out what's going on in the world. I read newspapers to find out what people think about what's going on in the world.
I do go to the internet, however, I like reading print news more than the internet.
So I find my news on news websites.
But I listen to the radio and watch TV news, sort of not 24-hour news, but sort of a news bulletin once a day. But I also have the radio on and pick up a lot from that.
A mixture of internet, and TV.
I think that print news is just easier to, it's tangible, you know, it's easier to look at, it's easier to take in, it's easier to read. But, you know, internet's easier, it's free, so I do find myself going to the internet nowadays for news.
You know, I feel like when I want to learn about current times, that's when I watch the news, because the news on TV and like the official news with an anchor, that's more like just telling you what has been going on in the past like 6 months, and actual news like instant news, like some celebrity's death or something. That happens on like Twitter and Facebook. You know, that's where you really get the real chunk of your news. Other people sharing about what they care about. What factors make me choose one source of another? I would have to say honesty and how willing you are to talk about news that may even be unflattering to your side of the fence, you know?
I don't. I don't choose one over another.
I think legitimacy, brand name, is a big one. You know, people, along with myself, will read things that have a name that is familiar. You know, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, BBC.
Say if you saw 2 or 3 competing ones, what kind of factors are you looking for to say, I would prefer to choose A versus B? Like, what would A exhibit that B wouldn't?
A lack of sensationalism, a lack of bias in the writing, but you can't have that. That's something that news isn't. That's why you have to choose many different sources, as I do.
But then there are other avenues. There's a newspaper that I'm sure you guys are familiar with called Spare Change, which is written by homeless people, which people would automatically assume is not as legitimate as another news source. But I think it is. You know, it's just a different medium. But I think its brand name is the most important.
It must be the topic that is important at this time, or that can be crucial for most people or for myself.
More information, but I'll go between different sources. Like I'll go to CNN and then I'll go to the Huffington Post, and then I'll go to FARC to see like if I see something that kind of is similar, and I'll go to various different places. I'll Google it, find different articles from different states even on the same subject.
I think the news must be fast, and I should believe for journalists which get this news.
Well, I guess someone that's any kind of news that's going to give you a straightforward kind of actually what's going on, unbiased, stuff like that. Cool.
I mean, balance and my English is not so good to answer. So I think it's the speed is very important.
Impartiality. Kind of have to say that being British.
I feel like a lot of times with people who are more liberal, they take the name of being, oh, this is honest news. Like, because just because we're able to see both sides of the fence doesn't mean we still aren't just greedy as the people we hate.
Yeah, I think impartiality is the most important for me. I need to know that it's a trustworthy, impartial, preferably independent, but I'm not entirely sure what that means anymore, source.
Having the intention to share what's going on in the world instead of trying to share the way you see the world.
Yeah. And so we naturally go towards the BBC to start with, and then may look out with that, but that's our first port of call.
Yeah. A lot of stuff you see on TV just isn't honest at all, and it's a shame where the most honest news you can get is comedy. Daily Show, Colbert Report, because it's gotten to a point where things are so ridiculous and people are so. You can't say people are so ignorant because it's like you're sounding like an asshole yourself, but it's gotten to a point where things are so ridiculous where news has to be broadcasted humorously, if you are to be honest.
Do you only consume news, or do you produce news, share it, tweet, Facebook like it, etc.?
Well, I guess I would share on Facebook. I would share articles that I would find interesting contemporarily at the time.
Hey, would you qualify that as content creation?
No, I wouldn't.
I usually just talk about it at work and stuff like that in my kitchen.
Cool.
I tend to not do as much tweeting. Facebook, occasionally I'll post something. Mostly I'll just send an email to somebody or an IM being like, hey, read this link.
It's important because that's what news is, right? People, as I said, it's recent events. So whatever we read is whatever events get shared the most. So yes, I think news. I do produce news myself. Yes.
Yeah, I usually read news online, even if that's the TV channel. That must be the channel of the TV. I also share it online in my blog.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's something really interesting, I might share it. Especially if it's something I feel like people need to see. If you make documentaries, I
don't. I just consume news.
I guess we kind of all like to think of ourselves as some sort of news creators and publishers.
If I care about something, I try to frame my perspective of it and share it with people who respect my opinion in any way. And even if they don't, you know, I try to share it in a way that's honest and, you know, share my experience.
I don't think I create news any more than I used to. I tell people about what I'm doing a lot more than I used to. Whether that has changed the definition of news, I have no idea. I think there's a danger of confusing the media and the message in a sense. I don't think I create news any more than I used to, but I do tell people about what I'm doing all the time.
If I was a news producer, what I would create is a fairer intake of what I share, you know.
If you were in the role of a news producer, what would you create?
I would put more black people on the news.
Well, could you be a little bit more specific, please?
Like maybe like this content areas or maybe particular forms of news?
I would, you know, when anything serious happens in society, I always feel like it happens to a black person first, but it's just not news. And it takes usually some white girl and Nancy Drew to make people get out of their seats. So that's what I'd do.
I would, if I had the choice, I think editorials are very important. Opinions, columns, things of that sort.
If you were in the role of a news producer, what would you create?
That's so general. What would I create? Are you asking me about what kind of content I would create? What I would write?
Yeah, either one would be fine.
Either one would be fine. Try and talk about, I guess, politics in a very, it'd be fun trying to be very sensationalist and go from a very Republican side and a very Democratic side. That'd be very interesting for me.
And again, I personally am interested in world events, so things that look at, different trends on a macro scale. So I would be interested in having columns or editorials or opinion pieces written on macro thematic events.
I would try to create genuine, informed, highbrow debate, because I think that's missing. I think people tend to get the news, be informed about something, be informed about events in a much more kind of, they go out and grab that from where they need it. I think it's a much more user-driven thing. If I was producing something, it would be much more focused on the debate, on the arguments from both sides, and on kind of raising the standard of debate.
If I had to make news, I would just try to provide as much information as possible and describe it as best as I possibly could.
We seem to have become fixated with going for the lowest common denominator and for looking at things at a very superficial level, and there is very little, well certainly in the UK, there's little in-depth debate to be found.
It's probably more there than anywhere else, but it's not enough. It's not good enough.
Well, I'd actually just go back to probably old school news reporting and have people be honest and not like yelling and screaming at each other during news broadcasts,
How would I improve the quality of news? I think it's like, in America, the word socialism is so demonized, but capitalism has kind of failed in the sense where, I agree with you, you should, if you work hard for something, you should be able to keep it. That's the way, I agree with that. That makes sense. But I don't think that's the way things have gone. I think it's just been privilege handed down to privilege, and the idea of capitalism is just an excuse for keeping that privilege.
More news sources, less large news sources would be great, actually. Less large sources owned by multinationals would be great, actually.
And I think that the system has kind of failed, especially in the news, because capitalism's promise was people's best product is the one that wins over. The product that people want to see the most, and that's not what news is.
I think that when people get caught up in, depends what kind of news we're talking about. If we're talking about, I think it's important to keep news non-biased.
News is, well, maybe it is now because people want to see crap, but it doesn't tell the truth. And I think to improve it, you have to take the same people who monetarily cripple the economy, monetarily cost redundant, but people whose money is their first intention instead of actually sharing the news.
So although I did say columns and editorials are interesting to read, if we're talking about big news sources that provide information to a wide range of people, it's important that that information is not skewed or presented with certain language in a certain way to send a specific type of message. I think that that's where people form, they form ignorant thoughts, I guess is the best word. The information they're being provided is skewed, and based on that skewed information, they produce their own biases, which are generally wrong because, again, the way it was presented is inherently biased. So
I think
get rid of 24-hour news. There's this constant.
Yeah,
constant with
absolutely.
24-hour news. What's happened is that they have to constantly fill, so they have to fill the gaps before the next news story comes in, and so they end up repeating and speculating, and there's a lot of rubbish that comes out. Whereas if the things were streamlined, perhaps not to go back to how it was 15 years ago with one news bulletin a day, but if things were slightly more streamlined, I think there would be. I think this more in-depth ability would be possible. But yeah, 24-hour news is a lot.
I think that getting more sources, sometimes I think that they put something out there very quickly, so you get like sort of a snippet, but then it's half wrong. So if people just waited a little bit longer or asked more people, I think that would increase the quality and also get more references. Like, we found this from XYZ, and we asked this person from XYZ, and we backed it up with this.
I think that's right. The irony is that in creating a complete wall-to-wall channel for news, actually what that's resulted in is superficiality. It's resulted in desperate news producers trying to fill airtime, and actually what's really missing is to focus in on a small number of issues in a controlled way and really dive deep into them. Of course, there's a lot of editorial judgment in that because, what are the issues and how are we going to approach them, but I think that's what's missing is that real depth and the sense of just stepping back, breathing, taking the time, and then producing.
Less debates and arguments over what's going on, opinionated news. I mean, it's just not, it doesn't do anybody any good, and I don't know.
True investigative journalism, that's what's missing.
That's also, that's a part of it.
It's just there's so many different outlets for media and news. I mean, it's a 24-hour a day thing that's there. And I guess because they have to fill the time, they harp on news stories that maybe aren't even necessarily news, or they just create something that's not even there. I think maybe if it was just more streamlined and less, maybe cut it from 24 to 15 hours a day or something like that, that might be more productive.